Biblical Psychology, the channel that combines psychological ideas with scripture to help you respond more effectively to the promises in the Bible with regards to mental health. And if this is the first time that you're joining us, you'll be very welcome to watch some of our previous episodes, particularly the first one that talks about the vision behind the channel. So today we're going to take a look at the controversial diagnosis, gender dysphoria. So just to quickly define what that is, and it refers to the distress that may accompany the incongruence between one's assigned gender and one's expressed gender. And where the controversy comes in is that there are groups who believe that this is a state of being, and as well as it being a medical condition in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health, version 5, or rather edition 5. So for those lobbying for this to be a state of being, they may argue that the individual's wish to change gender should be affirmed, and you may be aware that there are people who refer to themselves as non-binary and gender fluid if they're experiencing this state of being. And you may be aware that there are certain approaches within our society that support this approach of gender affirming. So for example, supporting people who want to make social transitions, like referring to themselves as the opposite gender to which they've been born as, so might change their names to be called something else. And we've also had people who've been through a gender affirming pathway in services that supports people to actually go through operations and receive hormone treatments to help them change their gender. But I have to say that there has been found problems with the gender affirming approach, and the service that we have in our country, which is the Gender Identity Development Service at the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust, has actually been closed down for the time being because of some of the risks and physical and psychological consequences that have occurred to individuals who have been transitioned to their desired gender. So I'd like just to refer you to a review that has been conducted to look into the practices of this clinic, and in that document we'll detail all of the issues that have been presented. But it's not the scope of this episode to go into that into detail, but I just would like to extract one passage which summarizes the issues that a gender affirming approach creates. So in this document it states, any child or young person being considered for hormone treatment should have a formal diagnosis and formulation which addresses the full range of factors affecting their physical, mental, developmental and psychosocial well-being. This formulation should then inform what options for support and interventions might be helpful for that child or young person. So it's upon this premise that I present to you the psychological evidence concerning the issues that this population presents with. Right, so on our agenda today, we're going to be looking at biblical perspectives on gender. We're going to have a look at what the psychological evidence for factors which affect this population of individuals' psychological well-being. And then we're going to bring everything together within a biblical psychology conclusion. So just going to start with some scriptures, and the first is taken from Genesis 1 verse 27. And that states, "Then God said, let us make man in our own image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image, according to our likeness. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply." So that passage was extracted from the book of Genesis, and for those of you familiar with the Bible will know that Genesis provides the creation account of when God created the world. And when he created the world, he said that his creation was good. But interestingly, when he created man and woman, he referred to that creation as very good. And we see in that passage that God created male and female in his own image. And what it suggests is that the gender in which we were born was our assigned gender, and acceptance of that gender is the way to go. So if we look at Psalm 139, verse 13 to 14, it states, "For you formed my inward parts, you covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well." And so what we get from that verse is that God doesn't make mistakes, that he was the one that created us the way we are. Having an attitude of gratitude with regards to our gender is a truth that the Bible reveals to us. So now I'm just going to look at the psychological evidence, and I think what it helps to explain is what happens to people when they are unable to embrace and accept their assigned biological gender. So on the screen, we're going to show a diagram of looking at what the psychological evidence suggests are the causes of gender dysphoria. And so we have what's referred to as psychological factors, biological factors, and parenting style factors. So just looking at psychological factors, now there's a vast body of research to confirm that individuals who present with gender dysphoria encounter numerous psychological factors. And one area relates to psychological trauma, and particularly trauma in childhood. So we're going to show you some examples of studies on the screen one by one, and I'll just pick one or two as examples. So the one that I picked under psychological factors is a study by Walt Heyer in 2018. And in their study, they highlight the case of an individual who turned to a transgender identity as a means of coping with pain and trauma. And just going on to parenting styles. So these studies suggest that certain dysfunctional parenting styles can also cause children to develop gender dysphoria. So, for example, Yazdan Panahi et al. In 2022 had done a review of numerous studies, which again will be showing up on the screen. And just as an example, in one of the studies, they identified that gender dysphoria is often associated with parental behavioral and emotional problems and severe distress. Now, interestingly, I've assessed children with gender dysphoria, and I do remember assessing a child who wanted to transition to its desired gender. And what was interesting about this family was that mother presented with very challenging mental health problems, and the child was almost like a young carer. And I mean, interestingly, that this child wanted to transition to a boy, and when one reflects on that dynamic, one might think, well, could it have been that the child felt that they had to perceive men as being stronger, and so wanted perhaps to transition to a child to feel that it was in a more of a comfortable place to actually care for their mother or their parent. And there's also been some biological factors which have been identified, which again will come up on the screen. And Aetna 2020 is an example of a study that highlights hormonal influences on the brain which appear to affect a person's biology, and therefore they might feel more identification with an opposite gender to the one that they were born with. So those are just some evidence that I've just presented that highlights that that there's causes to the gender dysphoria presentation, and it would be prudent of services to address these factors to help to reduce the distress that individuals within this population experience as a result of being that they're within their assigned gender. And if there's any sort of take-home message from this episode, I think as someone who adopts a biblical worldview would accept the truth in the Bible about how our gender was assigned, and seek to accept the gender that they were born in. And if an individual is experiencing distress surrounding their birth gender, that it's likely that there are other factors such as psychological factors which might be present, and that these factors will need to be addressed. And the most appropriate person perhaps to approach might be your general practitioner, who might be able to make a referral for appropriate services, or if you're in a church, a praying church that might be able to pray about some of these issues, and also if they believe in the power of prayer, then you might receive some relief that way. Well, that's all that I'm going to say on gender dysphoria. And I hope that there may have been something or some nugget of information that you may have been able to obtain which can assist you on your journey of recovery. And next week we're going to be looking at what I've called trans-diagnostic reflections. So you will know, if you've been tuning in on a weekly basis, that we've been focusing on diagnostic conditions which reflect negative emotions that people might have, and we're hoping to move into a season of looking at positive emotions within the field of positive psychology. But we're just going to bring this season of episodes to a conclusion and to summarize some of the themes that may have occurred across each of them. So don't forget to subscribe, because that way you'll be notified of all the future episodes coming up. Bye-bye.